Hi, this is Maria Williams. In today's video, I will show you how to create a die cut edge on your card so that you can match your die cuts. And I will be using the Painted Butterflies stamp set and coordinating dies from Altenew, but you could use any dies you have on hand. I decided that for today's project I was going to use Distress Oxide inks, and so I played around with Peacock Feathers and Dusty Concord and decided not to use those two colors, but I did decide to use Mustard Seed, Spiced Marmalade, and Picked Raspberry. So those are the colors that you see here, and I'm going to give you a couple of tips for stamping and die cutting the butterflies. These butterfly stamps are very sort of organic, and the dies don't fit exactly along any of the lines of either the solid images or the line images. And so I like to stamp the solid images first, so typically the ones that you would do in a brighter color. So I have gone ahead and mounted the two larger butterfly bodies, sort of the backgrounds, onto one block because I was running out of blocks, so I needed to stamp them to mount them both on one block. But as you'll see, it's not a problem at all. So I'm taking mustard seed ink for the larger butterfly. I've decided I was going to do all those butterflies in that color, and I have inked the stamp, and then I'm stamping off because I want a lighter shade for my finished butterflies. So I'm doing second generation stamping, and when you're doing stamping with stamps that have so much solid area, it's a good idea to stamp them off once anyway and then re-ink them. I find that you get a much better impression when you do that than if you just ink it up the first time and stamp with it. So because I'm off stamping here anyway, it didn't make a big difference. But anyway, I'm going to keep inking up the stamp with mustard seed and stamping off. And after I had done a couple, I decided that it was kind of a waste to stamp all those butterflies in the brighter mustard seed and not use them for anything. So I grabbed a separate piece of white cardstock and did my first stamp on that, and I will save all those images for a later project, and just kept on going until I was done with all the yellow butterflies. Once I was done stamping the larger solid image, I grab the detail image, and I'm going to stamp that one full strength. So I'm just taking it and inking it up with the same ink, the mustard seed, and stamping right on top of the larger solid image. These are fairly easy to align. You just have to make sure that you can see the gaps at the top and the bottom, and like I said, it's pretty easy to align these images without a stamp positioner. You could use one if you have one, and you know, it goes fairly quickly, but I found it easier to just go ahead and do it like this. Next, I moved on to the Spiced Marmalade and Picked Raspberry inks for the other butterfly. I'm only going to use one for each of the cards, and I already have the ones that I stamped previously, so if anything goes wrong, at least I have a backup. So I just did one in each color, and again I did the larger solid image first and then stamped the smaller solid images on top. I made sure that I cleaned my stamps really well in between so that I wouldn't get any cross-contamination. I wanted my colors to be nice and crisp. So I just use a piece of chamois, just one of those that you can get in the automotive section at Walmart, a really large one, and I just cut mine into small squares. They're about 6 by 6, and keep them damp in an old Chinese food container. With my stamping all done, I moved on to die cutting. Since I have one of each of the butterflies on this piece of cardstock, I'm going ahead and aligning both dies at the same time and using a little piece of washi tape. I had already used this die a few times, and the washi was a little worn, and so it wasn't really sticking. So I just took another piece and stuck it to my hand to deactivate the glue a little bit, and then went ahead and stuck it down and run the piece of cardstock through my Big Shot. You can already see how beautiful these butterflies are without even the final step, and that is to stamp the outlines, in this case in a dark color. I'm choosing to use black ink, so I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I've placed all the butterflies on a black piece of cardstock so that I can see the die cuts, all the parts of the die cuts really clearly so that when I go to stamp this line image, I can see exactly where it needs to go. And of course, if you don't have a camera above your stamping area, it's a little bit easier to line these up. But as you can see, I could still do a really nice job, and the butterflies turn out beautiful. At this point, I need to create my card base. So I need to create the die cut edge. So I'm taking some dies that I have left over from a previous project, and the reason I'm using these is I'm going to draw a line around them in pencil, and I want to make sure that my die cuts that I'm going to use for this project don't get dirty at all. So I'm just using leftovers. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay my card base flat and draw a line down the right side of it, leaving about an inch, inch and a quarter to the right of the line. This is the area that's going to be die cut away, and you'll be able to see the inside of the card. So I don't want to make the line too far to the left, because then I will be left with a very small area on the inside of the card where I can write my message. The idea here is to overlap the die cuts in such a way that they are intersecting at that line that I just drew. I don't want to leave big gaps, because then I would have just straight lines in between the die cuts, and I want it to be just follow the shape of the butterflies as much as possible. So as you can see, I am just overlapping the butterflies, and they come together right where that line is that I drew with the pencil. And I hope this will make a little bit more sense when I actually start the die cutting. Once the die cuts are exactly where I want them, I am just going to take a pencil and I'm just going to trace around the different die cuts. When I remove the die cuts, you can see the outline that I have drawn, and this is going to be my guide for die cutting. And you don't have to worry that if it looks a little bit messy, because all of this is either going to be cut away or ultimately covered with the die cuts themselves. Okay, so on to the die cutting. We are basically doing partial die cutting here, and we have to do one die at a time because the die cuts are going to be so close together that you cannot place more than one die on the cardstock at once. So I'm placing the first die cut on the bottom. You could really do these in any order you would like, but I'm starting at the bottom, and I'm lining it up with the outline that I drew earlier. I'm going to use a little bit of washi tape to hold the die in place, even though I am using a magnetic platform. And then I want to make sure that the beveled edge of my plate, which all the newer plates have beveled edges, so hopefully yours is like this as well. You want to make sure that the beginning of the bevel is lined up with the line that was previously drawn down the front of the card. Then you want to hold your plates firmly together and use your other hand to push the plates into the Big Shot until the lever catches, and then just make sure that you crank it all the way through to the other side. So now that you've done the first cut, it's easy to just repeat the process 2 more times. So you take the second die, you line it up with the outline, and of course you want to make sure that the right side of the die isn't going off your cardstock. Mine went off just a teeny tiny bit, but at least when you put the die cut on top of it, it won't be very noticeable from the other side. But just take care that your die cut is within the confines of your cardstock. So once again, I am placing the plate on top of the die so that the beveled area, wherever that starts, is lined up with the line that I drew, and I run it through the Big Shot. And then I just do this one more time with the last die, and all the die cutting is complete. So if you are just really lucky or just extremely talented, then the extra bits of cardstock will just fall off. But chances are that there will be some areas where the cardstock is still attached. So no worries, all you have to do is take some scissors and cut off the excess. And you don't have to get into the nooks and crannies right now. So for example, you saw that I just cut off the top edge because that was easy. But to cut the other areas, I'm going to go ahead and place my die cuts over the die cut edge just to make sure that I know exactly what I need to cut away. So again, I'm cutting off the excess. and then you can either use scissors, or what I like to do to get into these tight areas is to just get a small cutting mat and an X-Acto knife and just use it. And the die cuts will use the die cuts will serve as an edge and a cutting guide, so it's really easy to cut these small areas out. Then all I have to do is remove the die cuts, and if it bothers you, you can erase the lines, and if not, you can leave them, and then just score the card base. So I'm aligning the rectangular edge to the corner of my scoring board and scoring out 4 1/4, because my card is going to be a standard A2 size, so it's 4 1/4 by 5.5 finish size. I've seen a lot of people using the Gina K liquid glue on videos online, and I was at a local craft store and they had this Lawn Fawn glue, which appears to be the exact same. So I bought some, and this is what I'm using to glue my die cuts onto my card base. And I really like this glue. It doesn't give you a ton of time to move your die cuts around, but it does dry matte, and I like the way that it comes out. And I had tried this out and then hadn't used it in quite a while, and the glue still flowed perfectly, so there were no issues with the glue drying in the tip or anything like that. So I'm just applying a good amount, not a ton, of glue onto the back of my die cut, and then I'm just aligning it with the die cut edge and gluing it down and flipping the card base over just to make sure that the die cut is really well lined up with the edge. I did the exact same thing with all the die cuts for the other card, and then I started working on the sentiment. I'm using a stamp from the My Favorite Things stamp set called You Give Me Butterflies that says "Have a beautiful day," but I am combining it with a Concord and Ninth die set called Wonderful Word Dies, and I'm using the Wonderful Word die from the set. You could definitely just use the "Have a Beautiful Day" sentiment by itself, but I decided that this would jazz it up a little bit because I could use some glitter cardstock. So I'm using 2 different colors. This is all from a pack from the Paper Studio, and I already die cut 4 wonderful words out of thick white cardstock that I have backed with some Sizzix adhesive sheet. For these glitter cardstocks, I'm using Stick It adhesive, which I like a little bit better than the Sizzix. For some reason, when I peel the backer off the Sizzix adhesive sheet, sometimes the adhesive comes away with the backer, and I find that that doesn't seem to happen with the Stick It adhesive. So I've gone ahead and put some of the Stick It adhesive on the back of the cardstock, and then I'm going to run it through my Big Shot. Because this is a very intricate die, and because I'm using this glitter cardstock, which is pretty thick, and adhesive sheet, I am using a precision base plate, and that will help cut through the all the layers. As you can see, the words die cut really nicely, and I'm able to pull the entire word out without any trouble. And what I'm going to do is stack 2 of the white wonderful words that I die cut out of the thick white cardstock, and then top that off with the glittered wonderful that already has adhesive on the back as well. This is a great way to add a little bit more heft to the die cuts, so that they stand out a little bit more on the front of your card. I find that the easiest way to stack these die cuts is to leave one of them with the cardstock that I cut it from, and just layer the other ones on top, and then once everything is layered, then pull all of it together away from the original cardstock. And if you're lucky, the word comes out without the backer of the adhesive, so it is ready to put on your project. Sometimes you will have a little bit of trouble removing the paper backer from your adhesive sheet, and if you have great nails, that might be good enough. If not, you might try using the tip of an X-Acto knife or the top of a paper piercer to kind of pry it away. And if that doesn't work, the other thing you can do is lay your die cut on your tabletop, and then take the paper piercer and just kind of stick it into the paper backer and pull away from the edge. So you want to poke it close to the edge, because that way the backer will just lift up off of the adhesive. I'm going to set the die cuts aside for a moment, and I'm going to stamp the words on the front of my card. I'm going to stamp above and below the die cut, and because I have added so many layers, I was worried that the stamps wouldn't be able to stamp down onto the card with the die cut in the way. So I've just grabbed another one that has no layers. It's just a single die cut, and I'm just going to use it for placement. And in order to stamp have a and day, I just need to do some selective inking. So I'm just very carefully inking up the have a and making sure that it's really well inked. I definitely don't want to mess up my card at this point. So I'm inking it up, and then I'm simply just stamping it. And again, you could use a stamp positioner if it makes you a little nervous. But I'm also going to show you another alternative to the selective inking. And here's the alternative to selective inking, which is to simply cut your stamp. This is the great thing about photopolymer stamps. If you ever want to use the stamp as originally intended, you can just mount it onto the block that way, and nobody will ever know the difference. This way you can just you could even mount both stamps onto the same block around your sentiment, or you can just mount them separately, and then you don't have to worry about ink transferring if you didn't clean your stamp properly or anything like that. To finish off the front of the card, all you have to do is take that glitter cardstock stacked sentiment and place it in the middle of the two other sentiment words. I thought the cards looked a little bit plain, so I decided to add a strip of pattern paper to the inside. And this is a just a basic striped paper. This is actually from Stampin' Up. It's discontinued paper, but I know that there are a lot of gray and white and black and white papers out there. So for the first card, I used my my tape runner. I can't remember the exact name of the one I have right now, and adhered it to the inside of the card. And then for the second card, I decided, instead of using the tape runner, to use liquid glue. And this proved to be a little bit easier and a little bit more forgiving, because you can cut the strip longer than you need it and then cut off the edges, and that way you get a perfect fit, and you don't have to make sure that you align every single side perfectly. At this point, the cards are finished, and I'm really happy with the way they look, except that here is that dreaded smudge, which I now just consider an extra opportunity to embellish. I looked through my stash, and I ended up finding these enamel dots from Stampin' Up! From quite a while ago. I think they're from 2 years ago, but they actually matched the spiced marmalade and picked raspberry colors perfectly, I thought. So I just used 3 of them on each of the cards. And then, not wanting to stop my card making fun, I grabbed the mustard seed ink and smushed some of it on a block, added a little bit of water with a water brush, and just flicked some of the paint onto the front of the card, and repeated the same process with the spiced marmalade. I was really tempted to do one more thing, which was to add some Wink of Stella, but I controlled myself and decided to call the cards done. So here are the 2 cards. I hope that you enjoy the process and that you try it, and leave me a comment and let me know if you like the one with the spatter better, or if you like the one without the spatter. For links to the products I used and still shots, please visit my blog at mariascardsandmore.com. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.